Alrighty, good morning. Exposition video, if you want to listen to it, might be a little long this morning. But anyway, it's a beautiful morning. Might as well talk about exposition. Okay, so we did all of this in class yesterday, but even, Max, I'm not sure why, you guys, but he was up and at 'em this morning. So we already completed his parallelism worksheet and he had some questions. So I just wanted to talk through with you how I helped Max, if that can be helpful to you. So this week they are to write their paper. It's called the elocution stage, where they actually put their arrangement stage or their outline that they've arranged into paper form. They write it out, and so we really don't call our dress-ups in challenge dress-ups, we call them style. The style that we're going to use this week is parallelism. In order to help them use parallelism in the paper, we have a parallelism worksheet. So let me show you how this goes. So first, you need to know what is your thesis, and Max's thesis statement is whether Nat should blubber. His thesis actually is Nat should have felt the reason to blubber, okay? So what were his what are some three major points from his paper? Really from the thesis, his thought on the thesis. So he chose blubber. Obviously that's a major point of his paper. He chose Nat, another major point of his paper. He chose death. Personally, I would even just go through 2 columns on the worksheet, because they are going to come up with plenty of ideas for parallelism by just using 2 of the columns. If you want to go out and have them do all 3, fine. In class, I was just teasing, and we only did 1, and I was like, boom, you're done. There's your parallelism right there. But anyway, okay, wow, I'm not being very concise. So we chose the 2 most important parts of Max's paper, which is Nat and blubber. And I'm like, Max, blubber is going to be a really good one to think through, because, there's different definitions to blubber. There's whale blubber, and I guess there's crying blubber, which is what Hab meant in our story. But that might be something that he would want to tell the reader what he means by blubber. So we went ahead and chose blubber to be the first one we thought through. So over here, it tells us to come up with 3 nouns that relate to blubbering, 3 verbs that relate to blubbering, 3 adjectives that relate to blubbering, and 3 adverbs that relate to blubbering. And I'm like, Max, let's really let the reader know what we mean by blubbering by giving us 3 synonyms. The kids will know that's pleonasms, to really intentionally reinforce what we mean by blubbering. So we started with our verbs, and he said blubbering is the same as crying, sobbing, and weeping. So he could use that parallelism. Nat should feel the freedom to cry, to blubber, meaning to cry, to sob, to weep at his unfortunate circumstances, or whatever he wants to write. So we started there. So that way we'll really define for the people what it means to blubber. Then I went ahead and said, well, let's just go ahead and look at our adverbs, and let's go through and think about how he does those things. So Max came up with the words, he grievingly cries, he unashamedly weeps, and he sadly sobs. Okay? So again, once you get your verbs, you can come up with your adverbs by just describing your verbs. So then we went to adjectives. We were just like, maybe you could describe Nat as to why he should feel the freedom to cry. And Max said because he was sad, he was in a hopeless situation, and he was overwhelmed. And then finally, I was like, what were some of the things that would cause him to want to cry? And he chose the words grief, hopelessness, and sorrow. Okay? So all of those things. So then I said, all right, let's go over to Nat. So again, we kind of went with the negative part of this. Why should he feel the freedom to cry? And so it was the death, the war, and the unsupportive father that would be reasons why. However, I said, you know what? We're being really negative, aren't we? Let's talk about the positive things. Let's go ahead and describe Nat in his positive ways. Because even though he was smart and he was practical and he was resilient, that doesn't mean he can't cry, right? Finally, again, we went with why would he cry? He was indentured, he was becalmed, he was grieved. And then how was he these things? I couldn't come up with the word unfairly yesterday. I said unfairingly. So yeah, go me. He said hopelessly and repeatedly. So I just wanted to talk through, so you find the theme of your paper, you find 2 or 3 major topics in your paper, and you just kind of pick the thoughts apart using the different parts of speech. And again, if you'll notice, we took grief and we made it grievingly, right? We could have taken sorrow and turned it into sorrowfully. Sometimes you can just kind of use your words, but just utilize your essentials knowledge and put them in a different part of speech, right? So your kiddos should have the worksheet we did in class yesterday. We did the same worksheet from my paper, and my paper is right here. This is a sample of my paper, and we highlighted all of the parallelisms that I put in my paper. Your student only is required to use 1 parallelism. That's it. That's why I said literally Max could just in his paper write Nat should feel the freedom to blubber, which means to cry, to sob, to weep. Boom. That is his parallelism. He's finished. However, if your kiddos like to play around with words and they want to fill up their papers with parallelisms, obviously that's fine with me. Again, feel free to take your outlines and literally just type it word for word. Nat should have blubbered for 3 reasons. Jesus wept. Many people close to him died. He was indentured for 9 years. Okay, those are his 3 proofs. However, again, if your kid is a little more advanced with writing and he wants to like rethink the order, maybe Max would want to finish with Jesus wept, the prime example of a man who felt the freedom to cry. If he wants to make his thesis statement a little more precise or longer, do that. That's fine. If you notice in the Lost Tools of Writing book, you have your sample. This is an example of essay 2. Here's the sample of their essay. Their sentences are pretty short, pretty much to the fact, and that's fine. So here's a sample. These are the 3 subproofs that they added, and I'm sure, okay, their example of parallelism is in italics. Okay, so I always like to send samples home There's the book sample. There's my sample. There's the worksheet to help with parallelism. And then there is their outline. These two things should help them put together a stellar paper for Essay 2. Thanks, bye.